The 12 departed in separate submersibles, emerging at different locations around the globe to minimize detection. Dr. Elena Vasquez surfaced off the coast of Panama, where a nondescript fishing vessel awaited. As dawn broke over the horizon, she gazed at her reflection in a small handheld mirror, noting the new strands of gray at her temples that hadn't been there 3 months ago when the project began. "You look troubled," said Captain Rhodes, a grizzled veteran who had lost his family in the Valoran bombardment of New Auckland. "Wouldn't you be?" Elena replied, tucking away the quantum encryption key that contained 1/12 of the activation protocol. "We just created something that could end humanity as we know it." "The Velorans nearly did that already," Rhodes countered, his artificial eye whirring as it adjusted to the morning light. "At least your abomination gives us a fighting chance." Elena winced at the word, the same one General Santos had used before walking out of the project. What they had built wasn't just a weapon. The nanites were designed to rewrite human neural structures, enhance cellular regeneration, and create quantum entanglement between human minds. If activated, humanity would become something else entirely, potentially something far more capable of surviving in a hostile universe, but at what cost to their essential nature? The fishing vessel docked at a small marina where Elena's new identity awaited. Dr. Elena Vasquez would officially die in a lab accident next week. Maria Suarez, botanical researcher, would quietly take her place in a research station in the Andes. Before leaving the dock, Elena checked the secure channel on her comms device. One by one, green lights appeared as her 11 colleagues confirmed their safe dispersal. Dr. Takumi in Osaka, Dr. Chen in Singapore, Dr. Okafor in Nairobi, all vanishing into new lives, carrying their terrible secret. Her device chimed with an encrypted message from Dr. Elijah Stone. Was it worth it? Elena's fingers hovered over the keyboard. They had sacrificed everything. Careers, identities, relationships, to create humanity's final option. An option they all prayed would never be needed. She typed simply, "Ask me when we know if it saved us." As the sun climbed higher, Elena boarded a helicopter that would take her to her new life. Below, humanity continued rebuilding from the Valoran War. Cities rising from ruins, children playing in makeshift playgrounds, couples marrying amid the devastation. All blissfully unaware of the invisible machines now dormant in their water supplies, their building materials, their very bodies. The nanites would remain inert for generations, perhaps forever, unless the unthinkable happened and all 12 terminals received the activation code. Elena had designed them to integrate seamlessly with human biology until that moment, causing no harm, triggering no immune responses, simply waiting. The helicopter banked over a reclaimed agricultural zone where farmers were preparing for the first post-war harvest. Elena pressed her palm against the window, a lump forming in her throat. "Please forgive us," she whispered to the oblivious figures below. "We did what we thought necessary." As the Andes came into view, Elena closed her eyes, already calculating the odds of humanity's survival if another alien threat appeared. The switch was their insurance policy, their evolutionary failsafe, but activating it would mean the end of humanity as they knew it and the birth of something else entirely. God help whoever had to make that choice. The tritanium door closed behind Wei with a pneumatic hiss. Inside the small chamber, identical to dozens of maintenance rooms throughout Europa Station, the crimson light cast eerie shadows across the walls. His security clearance had never allowed him to know exactly what the switch would do, only that it represented humanity's final contingency plan. Authorization. Y. Jackson. "Commander." "Code Theta 9 Epsilon," he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. The room's only console unlocked with a soft chime. From beneath his uniform, Wei removed the medallion he'd worn for 20 years, a seemingly decorative piece that contained his fragment of the activation key. He'd been instructed to guard it with his life, to die before surrendering it. Now, sliding it into the console's receptacle felt like betraying everything he'd sworn to protect. The station shuddered again as Europa's ice sheets shifted. Or was it something else? The long-range sensors had detected dimensional anomalies approaching Jupiter's system, the same kind that had preceded Neptune Research Outpost Narration from existence. Wei's comm unit buzzed. "Commander, unidentified vessels approaching. Configuration unknown." Sir, they're not showing up on standard scanners, only on quantum field detectors." "Acknowledged," Wei replied, studying the activation sequence glowing on the console. "Initiate evacuation protocols. Priority personnel only." "Sir, that's less than 15% of the station's complement." Wei closed his eyes briefly. "I know. Execute the order." He disconnected before his subordinate could protest. The math was brutal but simple. The evacuation shuttles couldn't accommodate everyone, and most would die anyway if the Harbingers reached Europa. Better to save the essential personnel who might help rebuild, if there was anything left to rebuild. The activation sequence required a 12-digit code followed by biometric confirmation. Wei had memorized the code his first day on duty, reciting it silently each night before sleep for 20 years. Now, as his fingers hovered over the keypad, doubt seized him. What if Admiral Curry was wrong? What if this wasn't the threat the switch was designed for? The view screen on the wall activated automatically, showing external camera feeds. Wei's breath caught in his throat. A crystalline structure had appeared in Jupiter's orbit, a geometric impossibility that hurt his eyes to focus on. As he watched, a research vessel approaching the anomaly seemed to fold in on itself, compressing into nothingness, as though reality itself had rejected its existence. Wei's doubt vanished. He entered the 12-digit code, then placed his palm on the scanner. Identity confirmed. Activation sequence initiated, synchronizing with global network. The room's lighting shifted from crimson to a deep violet as the terminal connected with its 11 counterparts across the solar system. Wei felt a strange humming in his bones, as though the air itself had become charged with potential. "Commander Wei," came Admiral Curry's voice from the console. "Is that you?" "Yes, Admiral. Europa Station is compromised. I've initiated the sequence as ordered." There was a long pause before Curry responded. "Then we're committed." The Council voted, 11-1 in favor. "What exactly am I activating, Admiral?" Wei finally asked the question that had haunted him for 20 years. "Salvation," Curry answered, her voice hollow. "Or damnation. I'm not sure even the architects knew which." The console beeped as it received confirmation signals from the other terminals. One by one, green lights appeared on the display. 8, 9, 10, 11. When the 12th light illuminated, the console emitted a single pure tone. A message appeared on the screen. "Switch activated." Wei felt it instantly, a burning sensation beneath his skin, spreading rapidly through his nervous system. He gasped, collapsing to his knees as his vision fractured into multiple overlapping perspectives. His last coherent thought before consciousness shattered was a question he'd never dared ask aloud. What have we become? The observatory's emergency lights flickered as Sarah Chen Murphy crawled through the maintenance shaft, the data drive clutched against her chest like a talisman. Behind her, the agonized screams of her colleagues had fallen silent, a worse sound than their dying. 3 hours ago, they had been excited scientists documenting an unprecedented astronomical phenomenon. Now she was the only one left. The shaft opened into a small hangar bay where a single shuttle remained. Sarah sealed the hatch behind her, hands trembling as she keyed in the launch sequence. Through the viewport, she could see the crystalline formation spreading across the observatory's exterior, not growing like organic matter but solving the structure, transforming it into something that conformed to equations humans couldn't comprehend. As the shuttle engines fired, Sarah uploaded the observatory's final data packet to the emergency broadcast network. Humanity deserved a few minutes' warning. At least. The shuttle cleared Neptune's atmosphere, accelerating toward the nearest jump point. Sarah allowed herself a moment of hope. Then the navigation console erupted in warnings. Something was warping space directly ahead, creating gravitational distortions that shouldn't exist outside a black hole's event horizon. "No," she whispered, watching as a Harbinger vessel materialized before her. Unlike human ships with their utilitarian designs, the alien craft resembled a mathematical proof given physical form, angles intersecting in ways that violated Euclidean geometry, surfaces that seemed to recede infinitely inward while simultaneously projecting outward. Sarah's grandfather Chen had been one of the original Switch architects. As a child, she'd found his journal hidden in their family shrine, a violation of his oath of silence, but one he'd committed knowing the knowledge might someday be needed. He had written of the Switch as our final transformation, the death of humanity as we know it, and the birth of something that might survive. She dismissed it as the ramblings of a brilliant but paranoid old man. Now, as the Harbinger vessel extended crystalline appendages toward her shuttle, she understood. Her comm unit crackled to life. Impossible, given the dimensional interference surrounding her. "Dr. Chen Murphy," came a voice she recognized as Admiral Curry's. "If you're receiving this, the switch has been activated. All personnel with knowledge of Contingency Zero are being contacted." Sarah's response caught in her throat as the shuttle's hull began to resonate, molecules vibrating at frequencies that caused the metal to become translucent. "I'm being erased," she managed finally. "Neptune Observatory is gone. The Harbingers, they don't destroy. They solve." "We know," Corey replied, her voice eerily calm. "The Council voted. The switch is active. If you survive the next few minutes, you'll begin to change. All of us will." The shuttle's viewport crystallized, patterns forming that mirrored those on the Harbinger vessel. Through the transforming glass, Sarah watched her own hand begin to glimmer with microscopic movement beneath the skin. "It burns," she gasped as the nanites awakened within her bloodstream, responding to activation signals from across the solar system. "That's the transformation beginning," Corey said. "Your grandfather helped design the protocols specifically to counter dimensional manipulation. You're our canary, Doctor. If you survive contact with them." The communication cut off as reality warped around the shuttle. Sarah screamed as space-time itself seemed to fold through her body, pulling her into geometries humans weren't meant to perceive. The nanites surged in response, rewriting her neural pathways to process 11-dimensional space. Her last human thought was a memory, her grandfather teaching her origami as a child, showing her how to fold a flat sheet into a 3-dimensional crane. "Reality is just paper," he told her, waiting for someone who knows how to fold it. As her consciousness fractured and reformed, Sarah realized what he'd been preparing her for all along. The emergency bunker shook violently, dust cascading from the ceiling as the council members rushed toward the evacuation shaft. Dr. Elijah Stone remained seated at the table, staring at his hands as if they belonged to someone else. "Elijah, we need to move," Admiral Curry urged, gripping his shoulder. "The Harbingers are tunneling directly toward us." "I voted no," he said quietly. "Doesn't that count for something? Shouldn't someone bear witness to what we were before?" Another tremor, stronger this time. A support beam crashed down across the chamber entrance, narrowly missing General Rodriguez. "Your principles won't matter if you're erased from existence," Corey said, pulling him to his feet. "We need your mind intact, especially now." As they hurried toward the evacuation shaft, Stone's gaze fell on the empty activation terminal. Its surface still glowed with confirmation codes linking it to the 11 other terminals across the system. The switch was fully active now, no going back. "We've released something we don't understand," he murmured as they descended the emergency ladder. The architects themselves warned that the nanites were only partly programmable. They're designed to learn, to adapt based on the threats they encounter, which is exactly what we need against an enemy that rewrites reality, Corey countered. 3 levels down, they'd reached the small hangar bay where the last shuttle awaited. The other council members were already boarding, their faces ashen with the weight of their decision. Dr. Amara Osei stood by the shuttle hatch, monitoring a medical scanner. "It's starting," she announced, showing them the display. Nanite activation in all monitored populations. Neural restructuring is proceeding faster than the simulations predicted. Stone felt it then, a crawling sensation beneath his skin, like insects moving through his veins. He gasped, leaning against the shuttle's hull as his vision briefly split into overlapping perspectives. "How long until full integration?" Curry asked, seemingly unaffected so far. "Hours, not days," Osei replied. "The children are showing the most rapid changes. Their neural plasticity." She broke off, wincing as she pressed her palm to her temple. "It's accelerating." A low rumbling sound permeated the hangar bay. On the security monitors, they watched as the upper levels of the facility began to crystallize, transforming into impossible geometric patterns. "They're coming through," Rodriguez warned, ushering the remaining council members onto the shuttle. "We have minutes at most." As the engines primed, Stone gazed through the viewport at Mars' red landscape, perhaps the last time he would see it with wholly human eyes. Already the colors seemed different, spectrums expanding beyond what his brain should be able to process. "What if we've made something worse than the Harbingers?" he asked softly. Curry buckled into the seat beside him, her expression grim. "Then at least it will be our own destruction, not one imposed upon us." The shuttle lifted off as the hangar ceiling began to crystallize. Through the dissolving roof, Stone glimpsed the Harbinger vessel hovering above. A mathematical obscenity that hurt his changing mind to perceive. "My God," breathed Dr. Osei, pointing to the planet's surface as they accelerated away. Below them, spreading across Mars' landscape like a metallic infection, geometric patterns were forming, mirror images of the Harbinger structures, but distinctly different. Not random, Stone realized with dawning horror. Intentional. "The nanites," he whispered. "They're already adapting, learning from what they see, and communicating with each other across thousands of kilometers," added Corey, studying the patterns with growing wonder. Just as the architects theorized. Stone felt his consciousness expanding, thoughts branching in ways that would have been impossible yesterday. The terrifying truth dawned on him. Their humanity was already slipping away. What would replace it remained to be seen. On New Horizon Colony, the elementary school's emergency sirens blared as teachers herded children into designated safety zones. Through the reinforced windows, 8-year-old Lily Nakamura watched the colony's defense grid activate, shimmering curtains of energy designed to protect against conventional threats, useless against what was coming. "My head hurts," whimpered a boy beside her, clutching his temples. "Mine too," Lily admitted, though hurt wasn't quite right. It felt more like her thoughts were expanding, pushing against the confines of her skull. When she closed her eyes, she could almost see new connections forming in her mind. Neural pathways lighting up like the colony's network grid during system tests. Ms. Abernathy collapsed first, her lesson about Martian geography interrupted mid-sentence as she grasped at her throat, eyes wide with panic. She convulsed once, then went still, her skin taking on a metallic sheen that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The children's screams turned to fascinated silence as similar symptoms spread through the classroom. Some fought the changes, writhing on the floor, while others stood transfixed, watching their own skin ripple with subsurface movement. Lily felt strangely calm as the transformation overtook her. Unlike the adults, her developing brain adapted quickly, neural pathways realigning to accommodate new forms of perception. She raised her hand, watching in wonder as it became translucent, revealing intricate patterns flowing through her veins. Not blood anymore, but something that shimmered with purpose and intelligence. "I can see them," she whispered, as her perception expanded beyond the classroom walls. "The stars, they're singing." Across the colony, similar scenes unfolded as the activation wave spread. In the medical center, Dr. Marcus Okafor documented the changes with clinical detachment, even as his own body began to transform. His medical scanner showed impossible readings, neural density increasing exponentially, cellular mitochondria restructuring to process energy more efficiently, quantum entanglement forming between previously isolated systems. Patient 0 exhibits accelerated transformation. He dictated to his recorder, pretending professional distance could protect him from the horror of what was happening. Subject's genetic material appears intact, but his being augmented. He turned the scanner on himself, watching as his cellular structure began to reorganize. Rather than conventional mitosis, his cells were now replicating according to mathematical patterns he recognized from quantum computing models, patterns that allowed for distributed processing across biological systems. His last coherent entry, before his consciousness fragmented into parallel processing threads, was simple: "We are becoming the system." In orbit above Saturn, the research vessel Prometheus reported the first fatalities. Dr. Sanjay Kapoor, age 72, suffered catastrophic neural rejection, his aging brain unable to accommodate the sudden rewiring. 5 more elderly crew members followed, their bodies shutting down as the nanites attempted to implement changes their systems couldn't support. "Triage protocol enacted," announced Captain Diaz over the shipwide comm, her voice distorted by her own ongoing transformation. "All personnel under 40 to Central Medical. Older crew." She paused, the unspoken truth hanging in recycled air. Dr. Kim watched from the observation deck as Saturn's rings took on new dimensions in his enhanced vision, not just ice and rock, but quantum probabilities, gravitational distortions, patterns he'd never been able to perceive before. He documented the brain activity of younger crew members, noting with both scientific fascination and human dread that the children aboard were changing most dramatically. "Their neural architecture is completely reorganizing," he reported to Earth Command, unsure if anyone was still receiving. "Adult brains are being enhanced while maintaining basic structure. But the children, they're becoming something else." He focused his scanner on 6-year-old Ellie Mbeki, whose brain now showed activity in regions humans shouldn't possess. The girl sat cross-legged in the medical bay, eyes closed, fingers tracing equations in the air, equations that matched the approaching Harbinger vessel's dimensional signatures. "They're not just adapting to fight," Kim realized. "They're becoming the answer to the question the Harbingers are asking." His communication cut off as the ship's systems briefly failed, power rerouting to handle the vast energy demands of transforming human biology. In those moments of darkness, the children's eyes glowed with internal light, illuminating the future none of them had chosen, but all would have to embrace. Captain Daria Volkov flexed her fingers, watching the silver-blue neural filaments pulse beneath her skin. 3 days since the switch activation, and her body had become a battlefield between what she was and what she was becoming. Again, she ordered Private Mendez, who stood 20 meters away with his rifle. "Captain, I don't think." "That's correct. Private. You don't think. You follow orders." Volkov's voice carried unnatural harmonics now, an auditory side effect of her restructured vocal cords. "Fire." Mendez hesitated, then squeezed the trigger. The bullet left the barrel at 940 meters per second, a speed no human should be able to track visually, let alone react to. Yet Volkov's hand moved with impossible precision, electrical fields emanating from her fingertips to capture the projectile mid-flight. The bullet hovered between them, suspended in an electromagnetic cradle generated by her own bioelectric field. "Holy shit," whispered Mendez, his own transformation less dramatic, but still evident in the metallic flecks that now swirled through his irises. "Holy shit indeed, Private." Volkov released the electromagnetic field, letting the bullet drop harmlessly to the floor. "Now imagine 1,000 soldiers with these capabilities. 10,000. On Luna Base, Dr. Chen Murphy, still adapting to her own restructured nervous system after her close encounter with the Harbingers, monitored transformation patterns across the solar system. The holographic display showed billions of data points, each representing a human being in various stages of change. The specializations are following predictable patterns based on pre-existing neural architecture. She explained to her research team, their faces reflecting the blue glow of the display. Military personnel develop enhanced combat capabilities. Scientists manifest improved pattern recognition and cognitive processing. Children. She hesitated. Children are becoming something unique, finished Dr. Abrams, his eyes now featuring subtle metallic flecks that allowed him to perceive spectrums beyond normal human vision. Their transformations show no correlation to prior neural development. It's as if they're being rewritten according to a completely different blueprint. In the isolation ward adjacent to the research center, 57 humans writhed in restraints, those whose minds had fractured during transformation. Some babbled in mathematical equations, others screamed about seeing through walls or hearing the thoughts of people on distant planets. Psychological integration failure, noted Dr. Chen Murphy clinically, though her heart ached for these casualties of evolution. Their consciousness couldn't maintain cohesion during neural restructuring. And these are just the severe cases, added Dr. Osei, reviewing incoming medical reports from across human space. We're seeing millions with milder symptoms, dissociative episodes, phantom sensory inputs, identity dysphoria, as their sense of self adjusts to new cognitive architectures. The floor-to-ceiling display shifted to the quarantine facility on Europa, where Lily Nakamura and 87 other children had been isolated after their severe and synchronized transformations. The children sat in a perfect circle, eyes closed, occasionally speaking in perfect unison as they manipulated floating particles of dust into complex geometric structures. "What are they building?" whispered Dr. Chen Murphy, enhancing the image. Dr. Osei adjusted her scanner. "Not building. Modeling. Those dust patterns. They're creating a multidimensional representation of Harbinger architecture." On the display, young Lily opened her eyes, revealing irises inscribed with shifting geometric patterns, similar to those observed in Harbinger technology, but distinctly different, more orderly, more purposeful. "We see them now," the children announced simultaneously, their voices overlapping in eerie harmony. The Harbingers exist across 11 dimensions simultaneously, folding through spaces we couldn't perceive before. Dr. Chen Murphy felt a chill as Lily turned directly toward the camera, seeming to look through it to meet her gaze. "They solve what they don't understand by unmaking it," the girl explained with unsettling adult precision. "But we can solve problems by becoming something new, something that can exist in the same dimensional spaces they do." The dust particles between the children coalesced into a perfect model of a Harbinger vessel, then transformed, reconfiguring into a counter pattern, a solution to the equation the aliens represented. "We're becoming the answer," Lily said, now speaking alone, her small voice reverberating with the collective knowledge of all 88 transformed children. "We just need to finish solving ourselves." The researchers watched in silent awe as the children closed their eyes again, returning to their work, rewriting themselves, and, in doing so, redefining what humanity could become. The ruins of New Johannesburg stretched before Squad Commander Aisha Okafor, buildings half-crystallized into Harbinger architecture, streets warped into non-Euclidean geometries. 3 weeks ago, this had been humanity's largest off-world colony. Now it was a battlefield where reality itself was contested territory. Dimensional fluctuation at coordinates 42 to 7811. Thought Specialist Rivera. The message transmitted instantly through their shared neural network. Okafor acknowledged with a flicker of consciousness rather than words. Military units had abandoned verbal communication days ago. Too slow, too limited for their enhanced nervous systems. Now they operated as a distributed intelligence, 12 bodies sharing sensory input and tactical processing in real time. They moved in perfect synchrony, each soldier instinctively covering angles the others couldn't, their enhanced perception penetrating the Harbinger's dimensional camouflage. Where unmodified humans would have seen empty air, they perceived the subtle distortions that preceded a Harbinger materialization. Symphony Protocol Pattern Alpha 9. Okafor directed, the complex tactical pattern unfolding in their shared consciousness. The Harbinger materialized fully, a crystalline entity that seemed to reflect and refract itself through multiple dimensions simultaneously. Conventional weapons had proven useless against such beings. They simply shifted the affected portions of themselves into dimensions where the damage couldn't follow. But humanity was no longer limited to conventional warfare. The squad fired in precise sequence, their weapons calibrated to create a complex interference pattern. Each shot alone would have done nothing, but together they created a dimensional resonance that trapped the Harbinger in four-dimensional space long enough for Rivera to trigger the quantum disruptor. The entity shattered, its multi-dimensional anchors severed, fragments dissolving into mathematical noise. Convergence successful, Okafor transmitted to command. Target neutralized. Beneath Denver's scared surface, the Neural Integration Center hummed with activity. Once an emergency bunker designed to house government officials, it now served as humanity's collective brain. A vast chamber where billions of partially melded human minds worked in concert. Dr. Elena Vasquez, the last surviving original architect, monitored the proceedings from a wheelchair. At 103, she had been too old for the nanites to fully transform. Instead, they had stabilized her failing body while leaving her mind largely unchanged. An invaluable bridge between what humanity had been and what it was becoming. The counter-offensive is proceeding as projected, reported Dr. Takumi, once her colleague in creating the switch, now something closer to a hybrid intelligence. The Symphony protocols are proving effective against individual harbingers, but their mothership remains impervious. Elena studied the vast holographic display where billions of human-derived calculations modeled the dimensional mathematics of the Harbinger mothership. What they faced wasn't merely a vessel, but a nexus point where multiple universal laws intersected and rewrote each other. A mathematical fortress that conventional weapons couldn't even perceive, let alone damage. "We'd never designed the switch for this," Elena admitted, her aged voice thin against the background hum of quantum processors. "We anticipated the Velerans returning. Not this." Yet the nanites adapted, Takumi observed. They recognized the dimensional threat and reconfigured human neural architecture to perceive and counter it. Almost as if they knew, Elena finished. As if somewhere in their programming, they anticipated enemies that exist beyond three-dimensional space. An alert sounded throughout the facility as new data streamed in from Santiago. 30,000 connected humans had spontaneously synchronized, their individual identities merging into a collective consciousness that called itself Confluence. Unlike military units that maintain distinct identities within their neural networks, Confluence had dissolved the boundaries between selves entirely. "We refused further participation in fragmented existence," the entity communicated. "Individuality is inefficient against dimensional threats. We must converge to survive." Similar reports flooded in from population centers worldwide. Voluntary mergers creating new forms of distributed consciousness. Some military commanders demanded these emergent hive minds be contained or neutralized as threats to human autonomy. Others recognized their invaluable processing power. As the debates raged, sensors detected the Harbinger mothership entering Earth orbit, a massive crystalline structure that defied conventional perception, its arrival heralded by gravitational distortions and quantum fluctuations. In that moment, humanity's fractured consciousness found unexpected unity. Billions of minds, individual, networked, and merged, focused simultaneously on the existential threat hovering above them. What emerged wasn't verbal communication, but a mathematical proof transmitted directly into the dimensional frequencies the Harbingers occupied. A solution to the equation they had been solving by erasing human existence. "We are becoming something you cannot erase," the collective consciousness projected. "We are the solution that incorporates the problem." For the first time since their arrival, the Harbingers hesitated. Commander Jackson Wee stood at the observation deck of the Jupiter Ark. the massive habitat now serving as sanctuary for those who had rejected or couldn't adapt to the more extreme forms of integration. His neural enhancements were minimal compared to many, just enough to perceive the higher dimensions without losing his sense of individual identity. Below him, Jupiter's swirling clouds seemed different now. With his enhanced vision, he could see the gas giant's gravitational symphonies, the dance of quantum probabilities in its atmosphere, beauty he never could have perceived with human eyes. "Beautiful, isn't it?" came a voice behind him, layered with harmonic overtones that indicated a linked consciousness. We turned to find the viewport crystallizing momentarily, not in the chaotic pattern of Harbinger intrusion, but in an ordered lattice that heralded the arrival of 9-year-old Lily Nakamura. The girl's physical form flickered between solid matter and something more ephemeral as she approached, her consciousness now distributed across hundreds of bodies throughout the system. "You're different," Wei observed. Though he'd never met her before, her reputation preceded her, the child who had become the primary nexus of humanity's new collective consciousness. "We all are," Lily replied, her voice carrying the weight of millions who shared her distributed mind, some more than others. A year had passed since the activation of the switch. The Harbingers had retreated 3 months ago, their crystal ships dissolving back into the dimensional planes from which they'd emerged. Whether they had been defeated or merely decided humanity was no longer solvable remained unclear. "The Council is assembling," Lily informed him. "Your presence is requested." Wei had avoided the political debates around humanity's future, preferring his role as guardian of the Jupiter Ark. But the request, delivered by Lily herself, suggested this was no ordinary council session. The meeting took place on the repurposed Harbinger vessel, now serving as neutral ground between the various factions of transformed humanity. The chamber's crystalline architecture had been redesigned to accommodate multiple forms of consciousness: physical seats for individuals, resonance fields for the partially integrated, quantum entanglement nodes for the fully distributed. Wei took his place among the isolationists, those who had maintained strongest connections to their original human identity. Across the chamber, shimmering energy constructs represented the integrated collectives, entities that had discarded physical forms entirely. Between them stood representatives of the specialized, humans transformed in particular directions for specific functions. Some now existed primarily as mathematical processors, others as dimensional navigators, still others as archives of humanity's accumulated knowledge. From the shadows emerged Dr. Elijah Stone, the lone council member who had voted against activation, now serving as advocate for the remaining unmodified humans. "We gather to determine the path forward," he began, his voice carrying the weight of the millions dead and billions transformed. "Our species stands at a crossroads unprecedented in evolutionary history. The being that had once been Admiral Corey, now a luminous form of organized energy housed in a containment vessel, pulsed in response. We survived. That was the primary objective. At what cost?" Stone countered. 3 billion dead in the transformation process. Another billion suffering psychological fracturing. And what remains can barely be called human. "We were given 2 choices," the Admiral's consciousness replied. "Extinction or transformation. We chose to become something new." From a secluded corner stepped Dr. Elena Vasquez, the last surviving architect, now 103 years old and refusing all nanite integration beyond basic life support. The room fell silent in respect for the woman who had helped create the technology that had saved and transformed them. "The switch was never meant to be permanent," she revealed, her voice frail but determined. "It was designed with a reversal protocol." The chamber erupted in discord, the isolationists demanding restoration, the integrated defending their new existence, the specializations calculating futures no single consciousness could comprehend. Young Lily stepped into the center of the chamber, her presence immediately commanding attention. The air around her shimmered with potential as she addressed both sides. "I have analyzed the reversal protocol," she announced, displaying mathematical proofs too complex for unaugmented minds to follow. Complete reversal is impossible now. The changes have cascaded beyond the original nanite programming. We have become self-modifying systems. She extended her hands, and from them formed a glowing equation, not a reversal, but a new path forward. A covenant between what humanity had been and what it might become. What the switch began, we now direct, she declared. We will not surrender what makes us human, nor will we reject the potential of what we can become. As representatives of each faction approached the glowing equation, Y felt a subtle wave of energy ripple outward, not forcing change but offering choice. A door opened in his mind. The ability to connect or disconnect from the collective at will, to retain his identity while sharing in the greater consciousness. This is not an ending, Lily said, her voice now entirely her own rather than the collective's. Our ancestors could never have guessed what we would become, but we carry their spark forward. Their curiosity, their resilience, their hope. Beyond Jupiter's orbit, Y could sense humanity's transformed ships preparing to venture outward again, some to rebuild lost colonies, others to explore dimensions no human had previously conceived. A species reborn, carrying with them the most profound lesson of their transformation. Survival sometimes requires becoming something you never imagined you could be.